Ed Orgeron this morning on Off the Bench. Once we got past all of the COVID questions, talked about his biggest questions football-wise going into camp.
Well, quarterback, he's got, Myles has got to take the lead. And I do think he can. I think he can. There's no question. I've always had a lot of confidence in Myles, but it's going to be competitive at that position. Who's going to be our center? I think Liam could be a center. We're thinking about moving Chase on the guard. This new offensive line has got to come through the new 4-3 defense, knowing the nuances. I do believe we have an excellent football team. I can't wait till it all comes together.
I think we talked a lot about the center position last week. This makes sense to me. The Chasen Hines came back he was listed at 349 pounds, and you simply can't play center at that weight. So if he's going to be anywhere near that weight, he could be a very good guard. Now it's more crowded at guard. It's going to be playing time is going to be tougher to come by. But he is, if that's his build, then he is built like a guard.
Hey, I'm just glad there's competition. There is names that we can throw out there that the coaching staff feels really good about having a competition at center, at guard, at all of these positions. Because when you're talking about 6 weeks ago, when we had this conversation, and they were a little bit worried about the depth, Coach Insminger on the coach's caravan, I keep going back to that point, but he said, yeah, it's a worry. We've got to create some depth. We've got to have some guys step up. Well, it sounds like right now throughout this offseason, they've had some guys step up. And if you can create competition there, that's big. Because before that, it was, hey, this guy's going to be here. You felt good about your top five, but you didn't really know what the competition behind them was going to look like and the depth. This has created some depth. I think that is the most important part is now on the offensive line, we're talking about multiple names, not just five.
No, depth is the biggest thing on the offensive line because you just simply can't go through a season without having interchangeable parts. We know about what happened last year with suspensions and with injuries, and the one I always want to go back to is, for me, maybe the best offensive line that I've seen at LSU was the 2011 group. And from left to right, it went Chris Falk, Will Blackwell, P.J. Lonergan, and then usually Josh Williford and Alex Hurst was, generally speaking, your group there. All five of those guys, I covered that team every day. It was all I did, so that's why I'm able to – I couldn't tell you the one from 3 years ago, but I can tell you that one. And all five of those guys missed time. And T-Bob was huge in the middle. And then they had Greg Shaw, who came in and played at left tackle and at right tackle when things had to be shifted around. You have to have 7 or 8 guys who you feel really good about that can come in and give you reps. And I think that they have that right now. I don't know what it's going to look like 1 through 5 to start, but you've got to have at least 8, and I think that the numbers there look good.
They were concerned enough about the center position going into spring in what used to be the world as we knew it, that they were going to move a player from defense, and then they were still concerned enough, I know they didn't get through spring, then they were concerned enough about it to go and actively seek a transfer with some versatility that could include him playing center.
Yeah.
He was thought of as a nice depth piece. After hearing Ed say this, I wonder if he is not the odds-on favorite to start.
It sounds like it. And I've long said if you go out and you get a transfer, you have a game plan for him. You don't waste a scholarship. And Hunt, we've talked about this so many times. You don't go into the portal, waste a scholarship, or use a scholarship on what you could have used on a high school football player if you don't feel like there's a need to get a veteran player and you don't feel good about that veteran player coming in. And LSU's had some good success bringing some of those guys in. And if you can get a guy that you feel like can be depth and can compete for a starting job, then you go and do it. And it sounds like that's what they have. With each passing week, it seems like Shanahan gets more steam, gets more momentum in being the starting center. We all know what goes into that position. We talked about it with these 5-man protections that LSU's using. They have to have a center that can put them in the best possible protection because you don't have the safety blanket of a tight end or a running back behind you in a 6 or 7-man protection. And so when it's just your 5 guys, well, the quarterback has to know who he's throwing hot off of, and the offensive line has to make sure if they bring 5, they pick up 5. And so you've got to have a very smart football player, a versatile football player in this LSU system. That's why Lloyd Cushenberry was so important to this team a year ago. So if you feel like you had that with Shanahan, and you feel like Hines can be a guy that can play center and guard and give you depth there, it helps your football team. It gives you one more extra position of depth.
No, I think you can identify the grad transfers and transfers that they've brought in, and they were literally filling a hole. I mean, you had to go get Burrow. You didn't know what he was, but you needed to go get a starting quarterback. and they did. You
Terrence
had
Alexander.
I mean, I think you had at that point you thought you were going to get Surtain, and you didn't, and you had one I think transfer out. Maybe Kevin Tolliver left early, I think, but I think they had another transfer out at DB, and you had to go get a guy to literally play in the secondary, and then maybe not with Thad Moss. It wasn't as if they didn't have a single tight end on the roster. You hit there, but it wasn't a guy that you absolutely had to have. And then, of course, Cole Tracy, Ed Orgeron literally said in a press conference, "We don't have a kicker." So that's pretty obvious.
We are going to start going for it on fourth down.
They were going to go get a kicker.
And you got Jabril Cox coming in too. Another one that a lot of people assume will be a plug-and-play guy in the grad transfer market.
You can really do better than Whitworth, Livings, Wilkerson, Peterman, and Reed.
No.
That's better.
No,
but
that's the best.
That offensive line that they had in 11, they didn't have another option. Like they were just going to have to run it forward, or that was going to be it.
That 03 offensive line for a running back would have been utopia, right? I mean that's the group.
Well, that group in 11 seemed to do pretty well.
No, they did, but
I'm agreeing that one was better. But I do think that when you look at that line in 11,
give us the 07 offensive line off the top of your head. Let's see.
Let's see. Brett Helms played center.
He did. Great player.
Okay, hang on. You call me.
I got the left side.
The
left side.
I feel really good about myself because I'm sitting between like the two trivia guys right now.
Yeah, but see, I was all trained on going back to Saron Black was at left tackle.
Hey,
thanks a lot. Gosh, Helms was at center. Diakowski was at right tackle.
No, that was the year before.
That was 06.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I got Herman Johnson was left guard.
Herman Johnson was a left guard.
Lyle Hitt.
There you go, right guard.
The right tackle.
And for all the money, right tackle.
Cornell Stewart.
That's good.
Hey, there you go. Two converted defensive linemen.
Right.
Lyle Hitt and Cornell Stewart.
I could
Cornell
go.
ended up being a really
I
good
could
player.
go back to like the '86 SEC championship team where Nacho Alvarado was an All-American center and Eric Andelsek was a phenomenal left guard that played in the NFL, and Ralph Norwood, now the late Ralph Norwood at left tackle, the late Eric Andelsek at left guard, and Ruffin was playing right guard on that team. And I got to think about the right tackle for just a second here. I'm doing right tackle trivia here
that's tough.
on Tuesday.
Hey, we're not talking about negative things though, so that's all I care about. Somebody fact check me inside the Bayou Ford Huddle or on our YouTube feed. I don't believe anybody from the 07 offensive line played a regular season snap in the NFL.
Saron Black would have.
He would have if he wasn't bone on bone in his knees.
And he had any type of recovery.
Who was the edge rusher from Ohio State that was the Jets took him? Vernon Golston. My dad said one of the most fun times he had is he was in the team hotel after the 07, and the last thing the players want to do is talk to my dad, but he'd had a couple pops and he went up to Saron Black and he said, "You whipped that guy's ass. Like, we appreciate that."
Well, and Golston went high in the draft and was a complete bust.
Top 5, top 6.
Yeah. I
trained with him coming out at API in Arizona, and if you could make someone out of stone, like that's what they would look like. But he had a crazy stat too. Like at the time, he didn't have a single sack or something in his NFL career, and it was like deep into his NFL career. So you never know how it's going to work out, because when he was at Ohio State and we were game planning for him, it was like, all right, Dixon, Zinger, you're going to be whatever side he's on. Hester, Keelan, chip before you get out. Don't let him have a shot on Flynn.
He was going to be that big of a disruptor. One more from Ed Orgeron before we go to break. This is we was talking about Jamar Chase.
He's been phenomenal. Jamar's an excellent young man. He's very humble. He doesn't acquire a lot of attention. He doesn't. He's not in the media a lot. He just comes to work. He's a leader. They've had player-only practices. On Saturday morning when I come to work at 10 o'clock, they're running through red zone routes, him and the offense, and they're on their own out there, and he's the one that's leading. He's the one that's encouraging everybody. He's in the weight room. I think he's in the best shape he's ever been. I can't say enough good things about Jamar Chase, what he's done for LSU.
I hope we get to see Jamar Chase play again for LSU, because he's the highest rated prospect on his thing. If something happens to this season, he's going to be a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft. whenever that is.
Yeah, he's kind of the name that everybody talks about as far as if we had a spring season, would he be a guy that played, obviously. But it's good to hear he's taking that leadership role. I can tell you from being over across the street at the building, he is a guy that is still about working and grinding and being the best player that he can. He is not just sitting on the season that he just had. So him and Terrace Marshall have taken control of that room, along with Racey McMath. Racey McMath is a guy that's become a leader as well. So that room, I know a lot of people are curious, how it plays out. You lose Justin Jefferson. Is Jamar going to have the same, attitude that he had a year ago? I can promise you it was there in the spring, and it's been over there every time I've been in the building.
It's just such an asset for those guys and for Stingley, because we talk about it, and they brought it up to Orgeron this morning, but for Jamar to have Derek Stingley and for Stingley to have Jamar and then throw Terrace Marshall in that mix as well, for them to be able to work against that every single day and then to go out there and play against Auburn, it's just they're not as good. It's easier than dealing with the same guys that are on your team. It's such an asset for those guys to have each other, and I realize they're not able to work out and practice the way that wanted to do in the spring and the fall, but those guys have such an asset to have that type of competition across the line of scrimmage.